Companies spend a lot of money on advertising activities to try to build interest in their products. Campaigns are planned and ads are launched, but how does an advertiser know that their ads had an impact or not? There are many ways to do it, but one way, which is how YouTube typically does it, is by using a brand lift study, which utilizes a test and control group. The test group will be exposed to the ad, while the holdback group does not get the ad. Ever notice these surveys that pop up in YouTube or on news sites that ask you about ads or companies you have heard of? That's part of this brand lift study. The results are totaled and advertisers are able to measure the positive or negative lift of their ads. Did the campaign drive any awareness or product consideration or purchase intent? This helps to answer that. The concept of measuring lift and trying to understand what is actually changing behavior is something that I work on a lot in my professional life in advertising. I think it is a very interesting concept to share as we set the stage for our talk about Deka's J-8II Peace Pearl module, or what I would like to call the module that no one asked for. No, not that one. Not that one either. There we go. Ask yourself, when a module is announced, what parts of a module actually drives you from a no to a yes, or has an adverse effect to push you from a yes to a no? Is it who is it made by? Is it just the plane or the specific variant? The price? How the plane fits into the existing scene? Does this module have a place in your favorite server where you play? People have different preferences and tendencies, and the quality of modules in DCS varies quite significantly. Unlike in advertising, we will never get to the bottom of what has the biggest causal effect on purchasing behavior, but I think this line of questioning is interesting within the context of the Peace Pearl's controversial announcement because, after all, it was controversial. I would like to explain why people are happy for this module and why they are angry, and have you think about these points to see if any of these push you for or against the module. This video is really about you. I am curious where the community sits on this topic. If this is your first time here, this channel focuses on multiplayer sim gameplay, so if you're into that, please subscribe. This meme came out within an hour of the J-8II Peace Pearl's announcement, and I would like to thank the creator Aeck for allowing me to include it in the video, because I think it captures the general reaction from the players that were upset by the module announcement. The Peace Pearl was a program set up between the People's Republic of China and the United States. China was trying to develop its domestic jet industry and were facing troubles bringing their jets to a more modern standard and wanting to diversify away from the Soviet Union. They came to an agreement with the US. There was interest from the US to help build relations with China and to help entrench that wedge between China and the Soviet Union. The plan focused on modernizing the electronics, navigations, and radar equipment of the J-8s, and this is where we run into our first complaint about the Peace Pearl. When most people think of the J-8, they think of a domestic Chinese jet, something that we don't really have in DCS. The J-17 is a cooperation jet between Pakistan and China, and the J-11 is a copy of the Su-27. Having a real domestic Chinese jet in DCS would really offer up something new into the game, and some people do not consider the Peace Pearl version as a real domestic version. Why? Instead of having all Russian and Chinese avionics, we are going to get a J-8 that has an early F-16 radar, a MFD, and other Western avionics. From the angry player perspective, they argue that this takes something that could be potentially unique and makes it more bland by sticking avionics we are already familiar with and sticking it into a new airframe. Now, the counter-argument to this comes in two ways. The J-8 is an iconic Chinese aircraft, and the Chinese government will most likely not allow any documentation to become available to allow for a creation of this jet. So Deka did the next best thing and used the only documentation they could find, which was the Americanized version. The point here that the supporters argue is that it's the Peace Pearl or no J-8, and they would rather have it than not. Additionally, because of the Frankenstein nature of this jet, one could argue that this may be one of the most unique aircrafts in this game because it really is an intersection of East and West in the most literal sense. We also reached the second point, which is why some people are angry about this module selection. It is a unicorn plane. A unicorn airplane is defined in my favorite dictionary as a plane that existed more on paper than in actuality, produced in extremely small numbers or prototype levels. This typically gets applied in the World War II scene to the FW-190-13, where only one was produced. The J-8II Peace Pearl falls into this category because only two prototypes were actually produced. And in my preparation for this video, I could never really find out if any of these variants ever really took flight or not. There was even concerns communicated in a LA Times article that being able to fit all the new avionics into the nose of the airplane may not have even been possible. The party against this module selection are graded by the fact that this is a unicorn and argue that it is pulling the game away from its core of realism, and that better time could be spent on more iconic aircraft. The Red 4 players are hungry for go-to planes like the Su-17, MiG-25, Tu-16, etc. Why stretch for a unicorn? The supporters of this doubled down on their previous point. The J-8 is an iconic Chinese jet, and there was no way for this to be modeled because of the documentation limitations. So they are making the next best thing, or the only viable thing. Now we go full circle back to my analogy. What drives you to purchase a module? Deka is a module maker that we do sometimes forget about, but they did a good job with the J-17. They may have had the best, or definitely one of the best releases for a new module in DCS. So the module maker is probably well liked. If you were on the fence about this, is that enough to drive you to buy? What about the plane or the specific variant? Does the fact that this jet was a unicorn bother you? What about the fact that it has MFD and Western avionics? Do the systems really interest you about a module? Ask yourself, does this point bother you at all? Do the systems in this plane push you away from wanting to buy it? You may really look forward to operate a cockpit where East meets West and have a unique experience with that. Is there anything about the Peace Pearl that pushes you to or away from the module? For context, we did a poll in our Cold War server, and you can see the results here. It is pretty clear to me that there is a non-trivial amount of people that seem ambivalent about it in general. Additionally, many video game companies have been pushing to get into China and to develop the market. It's a huge country with a lot of purchasing power. I've been pretty surprised to see DCS not try to develop that market more. I would actually be really interested in hearing from any Chinese viewers if you are happy that your country will be more represented with the Peace Pearl, or are you annoyed that a non-domestic version of the aircraft is being modeled? I think the perspective from the Chinese community could be the most interesting side to hear from. I have been trying to keep myself out of this video as much as I can because I'm genuinely interested to get a read of the room. Hopefully by now you have made your decision. If you have, then I have one last thing to share that is often not talked about. What happens in DCS ripples out and affects a lot of people, and by people I mean gamers and aviation enthusiasts like you and me. DCS is the sun and there is a universe around it. ED develops DCS, people get the game and play it. Who makes money? ED makes money, and who else? The third-party module makers. Other businesses have formed to build modules. A non-trivial amount of these people are doing this part-time to help flesh out the game. What else, or rather, who else is in this universe? TrackIR, the VR companies, the peripherals like VKB and Virpil, in some ways are tied or related to the success of games like DCS. This game shrinks or grows and other companies, or rather other people, succeed or fail with it. Additionally, let me introduce a math formula here. ED takes a cut off every sale from any module that is sold. The industry standard is 30%. Assuming this is true for DCS, then for every 3 third-party modules that get sold, ED has effectively sold one of their own modules. Let us also remember that ED does not pick the modules that the third-party modules makers make. The third-party module makers have their own sources, their own interests, and their own limitations and capabilities. ED is making a space available for them to build into. Thinking about this has made me a bit more cautious about trying to decide if I like or hate this module, because basically the conclusion I have come to is that it doesn't matter. And ultimately what does matter is that the game succeeds, so all the other related companies succeed with it. And then we all get more things to enjoy. The bigger DCS gets, the more third-party module makers will join in, and more of the gaps will get covered. And hopefully with enough third-party module makers involved, ED can focus on turning DCS from what it is to a fully fleshed out game. While I do like some of the modules ED makes, I am really hoping that their core focus in the next few years is on gameplay, while a growing family of third-party module makers shore up new modules in the meantime. My only concern is that I just hope that someone making a certain module does not scare other module makers from wanting to make a more interesting variant of the same plane, which brings us back to the original point. What pushes you to buy or not buy a module? I hope this video gave you something to think about. Just like how marketers look at their advertising campaigns and measure success, you can think on what really pushes you to buy a module and stack up your logic against this module announcement. I look forward to reading all of your comments. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing. And again, leave a comment. I read all of them. And I really do mean it. I wanted this video to be about you and not me. Thanks.